Hello, everyone. A very good afternoon. I would like to thank you all for joining us today. My name is Aparna, and I'll be hosting this webinar. Before we get started, please let me take a few minutes to introduce Payatu. Payatu is a research-powered cybersecurity consulting firm. We have a decade-long track record with a singular focus on cybersecurity. The foundation of Payatu rests upon three pillars: community and conferences, consulting and training, products. Community and conferences encompass NullCon, an international security conference, training, and exhibition platform. Hardware.io, a hardware security focused conference along with other initiatives. Consulting and training focuses on thorough security assessments, which helps businesses to discover security threats and further provide training to strengthen network infrastructure. Lastly, we have three offerings: IoT Auditor, an IoT security testing and compliance platform; Exploity, an open source IoT security testing framework; CloudFirst, an automated and highly scalable first testing platform. Here is an overview of the various consulting assessments we are known for across the globe. Payatu has delivered many cyber talks and workshops in top security conferences that also include Black Hat and DEF CON. We take pride in the decade-long impact we have created by contributing to the cybersecurity community all around the world. As part of our ongoing commitment to fostering knowledge sharing and collaboration in the cybersecurity realm, Payatu has launched an exciting initiative, the Payatu WhatsApp community. The community aims to educate various organizations with various industry-specific cybersecurity content. That is all about Payatu. Today, Soummya Mukhopadhyay, Payatu's security consultant, will deliver a webinar on web exploit writing. You can read all about him on this slide. Before I hand it over to Soummya, I request you all to follow a few housekeeping tips. Please be on mute. If you have a question, you can write it in the chat box. We'll answer the question during the intervals or at the end of the webinar. We will be releasing the recording of this webinar on our digital channels, so make sure you are following Payatu. If you're not currently following Payatu, please check the links provided in the chat box to find Payatu's digital channels. Without further ado, let's get started. Soummya, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. First of all, thanks everyone for joining this webinar. Let me just start by sharing the PPT, what we have for this. Okay, so now when we begin with the term exploit writing, we have a very vast domain in our mind. Exploit writing, it could be binary exploitation, it could be exploiting a web application, it could be exploiting some kind of a thick line, right? So like, why exploit writing and why this topic of just beyond reporting bugs, right? So in our daily engagement, what we find, we came across different web applications, we found a bug and we submit it. Also, sometimes what we get to change some vulnerabilities. For example, we get a SQL injection. From that part, we get a remote code execution by file upload or something like that after getting authenticated session to that application, right? So this particular webinar, we will be focusing more over exploit writing and a very basic approach how to start with exploit writing by white box testing. We will be having the access of the source code of the application, and we will be doing some debugging stuff over there. We will be checking how we can create breakpoints in the application to check how the application is working. Okay, and finally we will write a exploit code to chain two vulnerabilities to get a remote code execution in the application. Coming to the part, why exploit writing? See, the main focus of exploit writing is that for me, it was always about chaining multiple vulnerabilities. Suppose we have what I just gave an example of. We have two vulnerabilities where we start with a SQL injection to get an authentication session in a web application, moving into a file upload vulnerability or any other kind of vulnerability from which we can get a code execution. If we try to perform this thing manually, we will have to perform each and every step, and then we get the final result. Why not just write a code for it? And we have many publicly available exploit what we use in MSF framework, and we get an exploit DB. We just copy it and run it. So this is also angle of this webinar where we will be able to understand how those people are writing those exploits, what we are using, and just running it and getting the reversal. So what we will learn in this webinar is basically we are going to use a demo website. Okay, I've developed this website using PHP, and in this website there are two vulnerabilities. You will see the vulnerabilities. I won't be showing how to find those vulnerabilities, but how to write the expert thing about the vulnerability that we will be covering. And this particular webinar is focused towards the newcomers in the cybersecurity field, so that they do not have to go through multiple challenges when they're testing or playing CK, something like that. Requirements, patience. So because in exploit writing, we need to go through some programming languages, and we need to analyze the source code. So it is not like in backboard testing, we just focus on some modules and testing it. We need to read the source code to understand that why we are getting that vulnerability and how we are about to exploit that vulnerability. Coming to the lab setup, so I will be using a Linux machine as the attacker machine and a Windows target machine. And the same Windows target machine, I have the source code, and I will be using a code editor to analyze the source code. And burp suit, I've included this because there are some things where we may require burp suit to cover that part. For programming language, I have chosen Python because it is a preferred language by me. The syntax are very easy, and it's easy to just copy and paste running in different systems. The same code will be working, right? Okay. So getting started. So I have created this PHP application. This uses the very basic level of PHP, no PDO stuff. Okay. So we can just run this code from GitHub. You can download it from GitHub. All the details are present in the GitHub. And we can just run it and perform the same thing. So there are multiple vulnerabilities in this application was created, but we are going to focus on two things, and we will be writing the same exploit script for that vulnerability. So here we start with the demo. So let us start with the scenario, what we have in this case, and what is by showing you the final goal of it, we'll be starting the thing. So first thing first, why I'm showing you the final goal, because it will give us a very good idea that what we are looking for. So I have this code basically, if you see over here, it's a Python script that I've written for the same exploitation that I will be doing. I will be showing each step, how I'm exploiting, how I'm writing the script, all these things. And to make this thing work, I need to deliver a payload to that particular server, which is hosted in this Windows 10 machine over here, whose IP is 192.168.10.20. And this is the attacker's machine. So I'm just hosting a Python server to deliver the payload, and a net cache listener to cache the cell. Okay. Finally, if we just run this script, so what we get is that we get a reverse shell, a web shell over here. The file was uploaded, the payload was uploaded from this computer, and we get a shell of the privilege with whom the particular web application is run, right? So this will be a final goal for this thing. Now, we have already seen this kind of things when we use the publicly available exploit from exploit.db or something like that. So we will be focusing on writing this script starting exploiting the initial vulnerability till the remote code execution part. So let us start with the application itself. Okay. So I already told you, I won't be showing you how to find the bugs. because that will take time, and the source codes are very easy, which is mainly focused on the exploiting part. That's why I've kept the source code very easy for this application. And this is a very uh, good application to practice yourself for just writing in different languages, not only in Python. So we have this login panel by which we can access the application, right? And also we have the source code over here. Now we can see the source code of this application over here. Let us start with our very basic approach, what we have in cybersecurity. If we find a login panel, we can try for authentication bypass by SQL injection, right? So now we already know, let us assume that we already know the SQL injection is present in this application. How we are knowing it? If we see the source code over here, so this is the index page that is getting loaded when we are just opening the application for the first time over here. So always the index page gets loaded. Now, if we start navigating over here, we can see there is a particular condition specified in PHP, that is set dollar underscore session, which is a super global variable in PHP. And if the UID is not set, then we are going to see this particular form. Okay. And by this form, if we look into this form action part, the attribute action, we can see the code is when we click the button, the data will be sent to this includes /controller.php part. Right. Now, if we visit the controller part, we can see that there is also a if statement given over here, which requires if the login attribute of the dollar underscore post super global variable is set, then this particular thing will be working. So now, if we take a close look to this particular function, we'll find out that there is no sanitization present in this code, right? So just what it is doing, this particular function is converting the password into MD5 hash format and sending the request over the server. Now, we already got an idea that there is a SQL vulnerability. Now, let us try to, from the application itself, let us try to exploit this thing. Now, directly what we can try some payloads like this. And look for it is working or not. Now, because we are not doing this, solving this machine, or we are testing this application in a black box perspective, we are using the white box approach, and we have the source code. Let me show you a trick to check how the particular SQL query is working in the server end. So what we can do, as I'm using XAMPP to run this particular thing. So in the MySQL config file, the myini file, you can add a particular 2 lines to create general logs. Okay. Now what it will be doing, all the queries getting executed from the client, it will be creating a log file, which is called mylog, and it will be storing all the queries over there. Right. So it will be easy for us to check all the things right now. So how the query is working or not. So it is located under the XAMPP folder, MySQL data, and this MySQL log file. So let me just open this file. Now we can see all the queries that I have run till now. All the queries are present. Let me just clear it out. Then it will be easy for everyone to understand. Now let's see. Suppose I'm giving some value like this. If we get back over here, let me just refresh this thing. We can see the exact query that is given to the database to get executed, right? So select asterisk from users, where uname equals to ASD and the password is in MD5 hash format. Now we get a very good idea what will be the exploit for that. Now what we can do is that, because like this type of exploit will directly work. Now, if we see the log over here, let us refresh it. We can see what exactly is happening in the background, and we can just analyze the code to make changes in the payload itself. Okay, so we can see the queries running like select star from users where username is dash, or it is checking for 1 equals to 1 and commenting out the rest of the query. Okay, so we can directly analyze this code from here only, and we do not need to pause or anything for checking this particular payload or not is working or not. So let us start by writing the initial exploit code for this, because we already have an idea that there will be a SQL vulnerability present over here. So we can start with the exploit writing part. So I'm creating a new Python file. Okay. For this, I'm using the module request. Okay. Nothing like I'm not creating any other thing, just basic syntax I will be giving you. And finally, you can check out this particular POC for the object-oriented part of Python programming, but that's not required. Anything will work. So I have imported request. Now, what are the two things it will be requiring is the IP address and the port number uh, with whom it is going to get the connection. So I'm just specifying a variable as target, and because I've already copied it over from here. So this is our target. Now we directly test for, let us check the connection first. It's not that we are directly writing the code and getting the exploitation, because while we're testing for connection, we'll see there are some kind of errors, and I will also showing you how to disable those errors. So we can use this request module to do a get request, not post it directly. Let's perform a get request to this URL. And let us check for the, let us print the response code. So this is a very simple thing. What we have done, we are just checking that if the connection, we are getting connected to the server or not, and checking for the response code. Okay. Now, directly when we are starting with the exploit, see there are so many errors that we are getting over here. Okay. Now, why it is happening? Because first of all, XAMPP uses self-signed certificate as a certificate. So this particular error is being thrown out for that. So to remove this error, what we can just type, we can give another parameter in the get request is verify equals to false. And this will stop the first error. Okay. So the SSL certificate error is now gone. And we are getting the 200 response also. Now, also there is another error which we are finding over here is the unverified HTTP request is being met. So for that, we can add 2 lines over here. So we are importing exceptions over here. We are from the exception part, we are importing something known as insecure request warnings. Okay, this is an object from this particular library, and also we need disable warnings URL list. And we need to pass the import secure insecure warnings to this particular function, right? So disable warnings, and we need to pass insecure warnings under. Insecure request warnings. There is a typo I think spelling. Let me just copy it from here. This happens because, yeah, warnings, it will be not warning, it will be warning. Okay, what happened? Yeah, so we have just disabled the warnings. Okay, so there was a typo in the warnings and warning, just a single S, which happens. So now we can see that the application is giving us 200 in response, right? Now we have done the first part, that we have got the 200 response and we are able to connect to the application. Now going into the other steps. So what we can do, we can check how the application is making the request to the particular server and create a payload for that and try to execute the same thing in that application. So if we check the source code, we can do this in two manners. If we check the source code, so this in the source code is specifying that we require for this particular thing to work, it requires a login param, uname, and a password to make it work. So this is the first thing we can check. Or otherwise, what we can else do is that we can directly run our browser with a proxy. And from the proxy, if we go to the history, we can check for the particular request that is that the application is making to the server to get the required result. Now, let us do the same. Let us write the same thing in the Python script. Okay. So let me just comment out this one. Now, there were three parameters. That was uname, password, and login. We can directly specify those parameters in something. There is an attribute known as data. Data accepts key pair values in the parameter, and it will send the same thing through the Python request, right? So let us send all the data from here. So we require uname. We require password. Finally, we require login. Now let us provide some junk value in this parameters. And now we can run this to check if our post request is working or not. We get a 200 response. Now understanding 200 response is not always easy. So like what we can also do is that why I'm showing you this is the error we get in while we writing it, because if you notice in the burp log, when we are sending the particular request, we are getting 302, right? But over here we are getting 200. So where is the mistake? I'm showing you. But before that, just let me print the headers of the response also. So now we see that we are getting the 200 response also and all the headers also. Okay. So why we are seeing the headers? Because there might be some kind of session identifier present in the cookie that we might be requiring to perform our exploitation afterwards. Right. Now, coming to the point, why we are getting 200 error over 200 response over here, but if we check in the burp part, it is giving us 302. Very simply, the answer is the request what we are sending from the the application itself, from the browser, is being sent to this particular thing. Okay, so the include slash controller.php part, but over here, if we check, we are sending the request directly to this particular target. So to check if this part is working or not, let us just copy and paste it over here. Let us check. What's happening? It's not showing 302 error, AG not present. Okay, now see, very interesting part over here. I just remember now. If you check the request, why we are not getting the 302 error and we are directly getting 200 error right now over here. When we are making the initial request to this particular application, okay, if the user is not valid, it is redirecting us with the location header to the index page, and the browser is also making the same request, okay, with the location header. Now, if we notice that we are getting the same header over here also, so the same response for that particular thing, to verify that if the same thing what we are getting from the browser and the similar answer we are getting from the this exploit code or not, what we can add. So we can add proxies for this also. I'm just adding proxies. So to add proxies, what we need to specify is that the proxies that we are going to use. So for all the HTTPS requests, we are going to use this proxy. We are basically redirecting it to the burp proxy itself. And for HTTP requests also, we will be using the same proxy. And just we need to give another parameter inside this request as proxies equals to the variable we created as prox. Now we can also verify that the same thing is working or not. So if we now visit our burp history, we can check that it is sending the request, the initial request, we are getting redirected back to the index page, and the index page is giving us the 200 in response. Okay. Now let us come into the exploitation part. Okay, so we have got a very basic idea that how we can configure the proxy with our exploitation code, how to access the URL, how to get rid of those errors. Now coming to the exploitation part, exploiting the first thing, we will be going into exploiting our we will start with exploiting the SQL vulnerability, right? Now we are already aware the how the code is working. Okay, so to check we can just copy this, okay, like to make ourselves understand that how we can craft our payload to just bypass this thing. What I basically do, I always copy, I make a copy of this code, and this is the parameter we have control over, and why we have also control over this parameter. But the thing is that we won't be able to use this because every data we are going to pass in the password parameter is going to be converted into MD5 hash, right? So let us only concentrate on the uname that we have control on. Now, first thing first, we do not have control over this code and the last code. So we can just escape the first code by inserting a single quote over here. Now for a Boolean logic, let us use the OR, and then we can provide it with something like any number like 1 equals to 1, right? So now what will happen is that also we can, yes, let us keep in this manner only. So if you check the first checking part, the condition over here, uname is blank, it is completed over here, or it is checking for this. Now, finally, what we need to do is that we need to just make the other part commented out. Okay, because we do not require the last thing to be working over here. So we can just comment it out, something like this. Okay. Now let us copy the payload we created and let us test it from our Linux machine, that will this thing work or not. Why this is happening? This is because of spaces. Spaces are there. Okay. Now this is not working because again we will take help of this. Okay. When we are giving the username over here and the payload over here, sorry, my computer again got stuck, I guess. Yeah. So when we get the payload over here and there is a single code that is missing out, so we can just omit this single code. It is directly because we do not have much time in the session. So showing you all this thing, how to check this thing or not. What we can do is that we can directly write the payload over here only and check if it is working or not from here only. So let me just copy the payload from the POC itself. I'm just omitting out. This. So here is the payload, and we need to pass the payload over here. So in username parameter, let us give the payload 1. And over here also, let us give the same payload. Let us check in the bulk part what we are getting. Okay. So this was a request. Again, invalid login. Why this payload is not working? Let me check once here. Again, the single code problem. I could delete the single code from. Let's check. Okay, I got the problem. See, sometimes what happened, this things happening nowadays. Why it is showing this particular error right now? because we are not using the previous session cookie to send in this request. Okay, we are just using the same session cookie. We are not using any session cookie only. If we check the difference between this request and the other request, this request, it is says sending the session cookie, but over here we are not sending the session cookie. Okay, we are already stuck in this part, so I'm just copying things from here, from this exploit, so that we don't get error afterwards. Let me just type only. Will be tricky then. Now, to have the session continuous session, what we can do two things. Okay, we can pass the value with the headers using the attribute cookies in the function post function itself, or else Python have this particular thing known as sessions, which we can also use. So sessions. So this will keep the session with the session tokens, and we can just pass the same thing over here. Now the request we will be using this response session variable to send the request. Let us check if it's working or not. If I pause this, okay, we do not need to pass it over here directly. We can just create an object out of it and use it. Okay. Now let us check if we are getting the session in the over here or not. Now see, when we send this request, now we are getting redirected to this part, but the session is not even coming. Why is it that? Because I think it's not taking the session from the initial part. Yeah, let me create another thing. Let us just skip this. Okay, let us skip this part. Let us try to get the initial exploit code. Then we can continue. Okay. Now, because over there, I think I'm making some mistake because of all this thing. I'm just using this referral code, what I've already created, to show you what is basic, what we are trying to perform. Okay, these things already happens. Now, we have this, we are creating a session, okay, using this particular request or session object, what we get over here. And now, these are all the beautification stuff, testing that if the connection is successful or not. How we are testing the connection? We are calling this particular test connection part. So it is coming over here and it is checking that if the code is true or not, it is forwarding the same request. Okay. And after that, what is happening over here? If these things are getting, these things will get it printed, and finally this SQLi.test function will be called from here. And here is the all the things that will be happening over here, because of which we will getting the reversion. Okay. Now, because of the time limitation, I will be just copying out all these things from here and showing you the same thing. Okay. Similar thing you can perform on your own also, right? So let us do in this manner. Let me just delete this stuff. So our target is basically this URL. Okay. Let us start with getting the session first. So session equals to, so we are making the object of session first. We are taking, first we'll get the response from that session. The session dot. Now we are going to get our payload. Okay, let me just copy the payload from here. Now, why we are using is creator payload, that I will be showing you. Why this and is creator is over here, not only this boolean logic. Actually, boolean logic, we are also putting that part. I will be showing you from the source code. Let me just get the initial exploit first. Okay. So same thing is happening now. Only we are using session to pass the session variable or the session cookie to get access to the application. And I will be just coming back to this part. Let us check if the code is working or not and check the response over here. But I don't know. I'm getting stuck. I'm not getting how it is getting stuck right now. And okay, let us see from this POC only, because we are not able to understand what is happening or not. Let us understand this POC from here only, because time limitations. Okay. Now, first, what we are doing over here, let us check line by line. Okay. So we are first we set it, check the connection, if the connection is working or not over here. We print something so that we can understand if the code is working or not. Now, our main exploitation part is working from line number 39 when we are calling this particular function. Okay, test dot and passing the session from here. Correct. Now, let us check where this function is working. So if we come over here, this particular function is being called test underscore connection. So in text underscore connection, there is the self object and the argument SES that we are getting the session form is also being passed. And over here, it is just sending a GET request to this particular URL, and it is checking if the response is 200 or not. That's it. So if it is returning true, then what will happen? It will be sharing back to this part and it is working. So this is the first step. Now the SQLite test part. If this condition is true, then this function is getting called. What this function is actually doing is testing something. It's not testing actually, because we already know aware of this particular exploit. So it is using this particular payload. So this particular payload is being used in this request. Let me just create some gaps over here, then we can understand. So this payload is being used in this request. This request is the same request that I'm sending from this one, but I don't know why it is not working. So to save time, I'm using this reference. So same self.ip is the IP address that is being passed in this particular class and is using the IP. It is sending the same thing to this exploit me URI part and sending the payload in uname and password, and the login is empty and verify false. Okay. Now, what it is doing is performing the SQL injection directly. And why we have put this is creator equals to 1 is that if we take a close look in this application, what we can do is that we can create some breakpoints. Okay. If you just see over here, there is nothing for any is creator part. Okay. There is no reference to is creator over here, but because we have the source code present over here, we can check in the SQL database. We can check directly in the SQL database that what this is creator is doing. So this is the database for this particular application, expert me. Everything is working slowly. In users part, so there is a particular column that is creator, and what is this doing is that it is specifying the admin role for this database. Okay, so if we check, if we use this particular user is admin from here and try to log in with the application. Okay, so what we will be getting, we can directly visit this particular thing, write a post. Okay, but if we use another user, that is user one that was already specified for this application, if we try to visit it, it will be showing us unauthorized. Okay, so I was supposed to show you all these things, but because the script took time to write, so I just skipped this part, and I can show you the source code that how it is working or not. So if we check, this is the post.php page that the admin is only the admin can only visit. So there is this particular condition where it is checking for this particular the key in the array $_session, the writer equals to 1 or not. If it is true, then it is just forwarding us and giving access to this particular page, and it is being done by this only. Okay, so if you check in line number 21 over here, okay, there is a syntax over here where we are giving the writer's value. We are putting a value into the writer part according to the thing we are retrieving from the database. So only for that thing, we are passing this payload as is creator equals to 1, so that we get access. Why we are not putting any user's name? Because that might be different for every application. But this is creator column for this table will be same. It won't change. if the application version is not changing. That's it. Okay. So this was our first payload, and by which we get access to the application itself. Right now, the second part is that we need to create the post. Now, if we take a look at the post.php file over here from the server side, what it is doing, we can check over here that here is a form, okay, and it is submitting the form to this local, again the same file, controller.php, okay. Excuse me. So in the controller.php, again there is a if condition. So in the if condition, it is checking for the $_post published, okay, and performing the things below it. So again, similarly, what we did was that we created a same request query with the post. Now over here, you can check that we have given the same arguments as publish, block title, and block body, because these are the things required for this particular thing to work. Right now, to give you for giving you an idea like how we can add our custom headers in the same request, because in some headers we can add our custom header like it's forward for something like that. I added this particular line. So this is not the real thing you will be getting uh, in a web application, but to make you guys understand that how can we add our own headers, I just gave a condition to check for from the request, PHP will check for the header X forwarded for, okay, and it will check if the X forwarded for is equals to the local host or not. Okay, a very simple thing. Otherwise, it will be again redirecting us back to the index page. Correct. So for this bypassing this particular functionality, we have given this particular header, the key where a variable header over here and the values over here, X forward for and the IP address of localhost. Now, if you check over here, simply how to pass the header, we can just put an argument over here as header. Okay, if you check, just we can pass argument like headers equals to header, and the Python script will be sending the header directly through this one only. Now, to understand how this working, I also created the same POC with a Python with the proxy server over here. So let us try to run, and this won't run because I haven't. I think this might run or not. Let me check. I need to change the IP address over here. Now let us check over here. What are the requests being sent? We can check. Let me just clear it. We send the request. So the first post request was sent by the exploit script with the payload, okay, and it is not rewriting us back to with the it is rewriting us back to the index page, but with not with the error, okay, with invalid error, something like that was present in the previous request. In the second request, what we are doing is that, see, now I already told you that this PHP session ID was used as the cookie to forward the request. Now you can check, because we are using the session object to send all these requests, the PHP session ID is now also being sent. Okay. Secondly, this is the part where we are sending the post request to the controller.php for uploading the blog. Okay. So over here, what we are saying is that we are just publishing the blog, and also notice that we have also forwarded the header, included the header in the request as X forward for, and for that we are not getting any error. That just we are getting the location, that EG example, and we can directly verify that what is this EG is doing from here. Okay, so like if some response is not equals to response, when if this query doesn't work, then it will be rewriting with the get parameter EG1 and if it is worked, so it will be sending us to eg2. So let us check what it is basically doing over here in the post.php file. So if eg is 1, so not uploaded will be popped up. eg2 not uploaded, it will be showing uploaded. That's it, a very simple thing. So this would be very interesting if that code was working. I don't know, suddenly while showing the demo it was not working. Why it is not working? Bad luck. So this was the second step that we are performing to upload the file. Okay, now how the file is getting uploaded, that is also a question. Let us check the function over here, what this function is actually doing. So it is checking that if is set the block title is there or not, and block body is there or not, means if we are getting any value inside that or not. Okay, then it is using its own variables in PHP, declaring the variables and creating a SQL query and executing it. Okay, so MySQLi underscore query is getting executed, and these two things are checking the data. So until this, it was okay. There is also a vulnerability over here that we can perform SQL injection to inject something, but let us assume that the user doesn't have any DBA permission. Okay, so without DBA permission, we just cannot execute get an RC with the SQLi, right? So we are assuming that only. Now, if we check over here in the else part, where actually if the things get work, so this else will be working. So what it is doing is that it is creating a file. Okay, it is creating a file under the directory blocks. Now the main problem is over here. Now can anyone tell me by seeing this code that what is the problem and how can we use this thing to get a RC? You can just type in the chat. Let me tell you to give you an idea. So what this fopen is doing, it is writing a file. Okay, it is open with the right permission, so it is writing a file, not reading it. If you check the code, like I'm giving you 1 more minute. If anyone wants to answer them, then I will continue. Okay, so see, we can do the LFI part, but we have only control. If you see, we have only control over this parameter. When it is performing all these steps, we have control over this particular block title part, because this block title is sent with the request only. Now, if you check, when we are sending the block title, there is no extension present over here. It is not appended with any extension. It's something like .txt. It is not appending with any extension. So what is happening over there? So when we are sending this particular payload from this part, if we check over here, so this is the header. This is the basically payload number 2, which we are passing through the body title, block title. Okay. Sorry, this is the payload that we are sending with the block body. Okay, so this is the last final payload. But if we pass anything with the extension, like what I've specified over here is like get system.php. Suppose I am typing over here case.php. Okay, now if I run this program from here and check under the blog, see, we created a file in the PHP format because there was no extension appended over here. That means we have control over what is the extension by which the file is getting created. Okay, so similarly, we can create a text file if we just put txt over here and run it. verify over here. See, we again created another txt file because we have the control over the format of that thing. Finally, we also find that during our source code review, for this scenario only, I'm specifying that we can also directly access this particular path from the external IPs. If you notice, the security level is somewhat low over here because of what? Because it is only checking for the request to publish a blog, but there is no restriction to for accessing this particular blog directory. So what we can do, we can directly access the blog directory from the URL itself. So what I did to execute this particular thing, I'm just sending a post request to this particular file that I've created to get the code execution. So for the proof of concept, what I did was that I just, for the payload part, because the payload body was saved under the, let me just, for this example, I'm just changing this name to webinar. This, okay. Web. Okay. Web. Okay. So I'm creating the, because we have the control over the block title part. So we are creating the payload with that, sorry, the file with that, and the payload is very simple PHP payload where we are just giving PHP system command to run who am I, and we are just printing the output of that response. Okay, the final third response, we are printing the output of it. So now if I run this particular file, if everything works fine, we get the output of the who am I command, which is this one. Okay. And to verify that this was the same thing we uploaded, we can check the file that was created over here, web.php, and this was the command inside it that we got executed. So this was the total POC part. And finally, to get a remote code execution. Okay, before going into remote code execution, let us see what were the requests being sent from here. Let me clear it once more. Let me rerun this request. So first, we already got to know it is performing the SQLite vulnerability. Second, it is checking that the thing is accessible or not. The third part is the blog publication part. So for publishing the blog, it is using the X forwarded for header. It is sending publish blog title as the file name. Okay, and the payload in the blog body part. So when it is done, it is because this particular thing had a response of this, it was redirecting us back to this page. So this 52 number request is being sent. Finally, our final exploit, we are just trying to request that file to get the file executed in the server side. We send the request directly to this web.php and we can see the result. Okay, so this was the basic lesson, but it would have been more interesting if I could show you all the things by typing the exploit thing. That might be interesting, but this was the gist of all this thing. So basically, exploit writing is very interesting. There might be a hurdle, like I told you, patience is the key, but covering the topic in very small time, 1 hour, is not possible. For this reason, sometimes it works, sometimes it works, won't work. There will be multiple typos because we are also just seeing the code and writing it. Not being a developer, just being a cybersecurity guy, typing a code is little challenging for me also. But this is the main thing that we can learn from this part. Also, some tricks what we can do, like for checking out how the SQL query is getting executed in the server side, we can directly check the SQLi logs for that cases. Also, one thing what we can also do is that we can, for PHP applications, this is also a thing that I do. We can use some debugger like XDBG. Okay, so I use XDebugger. If I put a breakpoint over here and try to run it. Okay. So this is running. Let me run the exploit from here. we can exactly find out that this thing has, you can see the breakpoint was triggered over here. Now we can check for all the variables that is checking for is correct or not, something like that. So these are the things we can check for using breakpoints. And finally, oh, last, let me just close this, stop this over. Finally, to get a remote code execution, I am using this reverse shell page, PowerShell script. Okay. And this is not obfuscated, nothing like that. We're not doing antivirus bypass. I have turned off the real-time protection over here to make this payload work. Okay. So, and what I'm doing, because to execute directly on memory, I'm not downloading it separately. I'm just using this command over here, IEX, that it will be IWR to invoke web request and to execute this thing directly in the PowerShell session. I'm just pasting the payload. That's why I hosted a particular Python server to transfer the payload to the victim machine. And by just after finally, when we are sending the third request from here, this thing will get executed. So this was all about the exploit writing part, like how we can use multiple bugs to finally get a remote code execution. Sometimes we will not get remote code execution, but this makes us understand how the exploit writing thing works in the real life. Also, we can use this same thing to make changes in the publicly available exploit if there are some problems over there, right? Now we are coming to the end of our webinar.
Thank you all for being such wonderful participants. I hope you guys have a really nice weekend. Thank you so much.